There's a business that has lasted longer than any empire, survived every war, and adapted to every technology. It doesn't sell food, clothing, or technology. It sells meaning. And unlike every other product on Earth, this one doesn't need proof, packaging, or delivery. All it needs is belief. Religion mastered this model long before corporations existed. It found the perfect business structure, a loyal customer base, an endless supply of emotional demand, and a product that can never be proven or refunded. When people say religion isn't about money, they often overlook that it behaves exactly like an economy of faith, a marketplace of salvation. Think about how every major religion is built: a hierarchy of authority, an infrastructure of buildings, rituals, marketing, and outreach. There are uniforms, slogans, symbols, membership systems, even brand ambassadors, the priests, imams, monks, and preachers who carry the message. There are competing branches, each claiming their version of truth, just like rival companies claiming superiority over the others. But the brilliance and danger of religion as a business is that it sells what no one else can: eternal life, forgiveness, purpose, and the illusion of cosmic importance. These aren't just spiritual ideas, they're the most powerful psychological incentives ever discovered. Once you convince someone that your product can decide their fate after death, you've secured a customer for life. Money flows naturally into that promise. Offerings, donations, tithes, zakat, pilgrimages, sacred objects, all designed to sustain the structure. Yet few people notice how religion monetizes fear, guilt, and hope simultaneously. Fear of hell becomes a marketing tool. Guilt becomes an income stream. Hope becomes a subscription model. And it's all built on authority. Someone must define the rules, interpret the text, and manage the followers. That leadership forms the equivalent of a corporate board. It's not called management, but functionally, that's what it is: control over information, distribution, and loyalty. In ancient times, religious institutions didn't just guide the spirit. They controlled economies. Temples were banks, cathedrals were tax collectors, and clerics acted as legal authorities. The most sacred buildings were often the richest. Even today, the world's largest religious organizations hold vast investments, property, and political influence, all tax-exempt, immune to financial transparency. But what makes this system endure isn't greed, it's need. People crave certainty in an uncertain world. They want to believe someone knows what happens after death, that suffering has meaning, that someone is watching over them. Religion saw that vulnerability and turned it into a self-sustaining business model. Give meaning in exchange for devotion. And that devotion, when reinforced through ritual, repetition, and community, becomes habit. A person born into a faith is more likely to stay in it because the entire social structure, family, culture, morality, is tied to it. Leaving isn't just losing belief, it's losing identity. And that emotional cost keeps the cycle intact. Yet beneath that comfort lies a question. If religion's true goal were spiritual enlightenment, why does it always return to money, property, and power? Why do the richest institutions on earth preach humility to the poor while owning art collections, gold altars, and real estate portfolios larger than entire nations? The answer may not be in what religion says, but in what it does. It operates like a corporation that's mastered emotional marketing. Its product is intangible, but its influence is measurable in every corner of human civilization. And that's just the beginning. Because this business doesn't just sell beliefs, it sells belonging. When people join a religion, they rarely see it as joining an organization. They see it as finding truth, community, and moral clarity. But from a structural perspective, what they're really entering is a system, one that understands the psychology of belonging better than any modern brand ever could. The genius of religion's business model is how it binds emotion to loyalty. It doesn't rely on products. It relies on identity. When you believe that your group is chosen, righteous, or spiritually superior, you'll defend it without question. You'll contribute time, labor, and money, Not because someone sold you something, but because you think you owe it to something greater than yourself. Sociologists call this group identity reinforcement. It's the mechanism that makes believers feel both special and dependent. You're told you are part of a divine plan, yet you're also told you're nothing without faith. That contradiction is not a flaw, it's the engine. It keeps followers humble, obedient, and grateful, always seeking forgiveness, always needing more guidance, and always returning to the same source for answers. Now add guilt to that structure. Religion discovered that guilt is one of the most reliable motivators of human behavior. It's self-sustaining. Once a person internalizes guilt for their thoughts, actions, or even their nature, they'll seek relief through rituals, donations, and confessions. The cycle is perfect. Guilt creates the need for forgiveness, forgiveness reinforces faith, and faith ensures loyalty. And because forgiveness is controlled by the same institution that defined sin, it's a closed economy. The supplier of guilt is also the supplier of relief. No external competitor can enter that market because religion claims divine monopoly. You can't outcompete God in the forgiveness business. The psychological reach of that system is enormous. It can make people confess crimes they didn't commit, suppress desires they can't change, or believe suffering is noble. It shapes how people vote, raise children, and even die. And when that kind of influence is monetized, it becomes power. Not the spiritual kind, but social and political. Consider how religious institutions historically inserted themselves into every life event. Birth, there's a ceremony. Marriage, a fee for the sacred blessing. Death, pay for prayers, burials, and memorials. Every major human transition was turned into a financial transaction disguised as devotion. Even today you can pay for masses, pilgrimages, indulgences, and offerings, all for intangible returns that no one can verify. The system thrives on symbols. A simple piece of metal or cloth becomes holy. Water becomes sacred. Words become divine. By attaching supernatural value to ordinary things, religion created the oldest form of branded merchandise. The items themselves are worthless, but their meaning is priceless. That's how faith turns into economy. This same principle is seen in the creation of relics. Bones, fabrics, stones, and objects claimed to hold divine power. In medieval Europe, entire cities competed to claim ownership of relics, because relics meant pilgrims, and pilgrims meant money. It was spiritual tourism before tourism existed. Roads were built, inns opened, markets flourished, all fueled by people chasing the promise of holiness. And that same pattern exists today, though more sophisticated. Mega churches live stream services that reach millions. Religious influencers sell books, workshops, and spiritual retreats. Televangelists preach prosperity while flying private jets. And every word is framed as faith. It's branding with divine immunity. Criticizing it becomes taboo, as if questioning the system is equivalent to questioning truth itself. But behind the sermons and songs, the machinery is unmistakable. A vast network of revenue streams, membership retention strategies, and emotional triggers. The church, the mosque, the temple, they all operate as central offices managing a global audience. Faith is the message. Money is the medium. Yet the people inside it rarely see it that way. Most genuinely believe they're serving something sacred. And in many cases, they are sincere. That's part of what makes the system so resilient. It doesn't rely on cynicism. It relies on sincerity. The priests, imams, and monks often believe just as deeply as the followers. That sincerity gives the illusion of purity, even as the structure thrives on predictable human behavior. So when someone questions religion's financial motives, the defense comes instantly. It's not about money. But look at the results in the opulent buildings, the tax exemptions, the influence in politics and education. No corporation has ever enjoyed such immunity. Religion sells meaning, demands loyalty, and collects payments, yet remains untouchable because its product can't be proven false or refunded. And through it all, The one thing it protects most fiercely is control. Control of belief, control of identity, control of guilt. Because control is the foundation of profit. No product in human history has had more loyal customers than the promise of life after death. It's the ultimate offer, infinite reward for finite obedience, and religion has perfected how to sell it. Every major faith builds its power on this idea. Death isn't the end, it's the transaction point. Your choices, your donations, your faith, they all accumulate interest in the afterlife. Whether it's heaven, paradise, or enlightenment, there's always a next stage waiting, and religion claims to hold the only access key. From an economic view, this is genius. Every other business must deliver results in this life. Religion, however, delays delivery until the next, a place no customer can ever verify or complain from. It's the most risk-free contract imaginable. You give loyalty now, payment later, proof never. Fear drives this transaction. Fear of death, fear of punishment, fear of being wrong. That fear creates compliance. The afterlife becomes a moral scoreboard, a way to monitor thought and behavior without force. You don't need police when people believe the universe itself is watching. Throughout history, leaders realized how effective this was. Ancient rulers merged religion and power to stabilize their reigns. Obedience to the priest became obedience to the king. Disobedience became sin. This fusion of divine authority and political control turned religion into a governing tool, cheaper than armies, more persuasive than laws. The afterlife economy was built on that structure. Think of indulgences in medieval Europe, payments to reduce time in purgatory. It was an official system, backed by the church, monetizing fear of eternal punishment. Families spent fortunes to save their dead relatives, convinced that salvation could be bought. The richer you were, the faster your soul moved upward. That pattern didn't vanish. It evolved. In modern times, it appears as donations for blessings, tithes for prosperity, offerings for healing. Religious leaders promise miracles and success in exchange for generosity. A spiritual version of investment. The message is always the same: give now, receive later. Psychologists have long studied why people fall for this. One explanation is terror management theory, the idea that humans, aware of their own mortality, build belief systems to protect themselves from existential fear. Religion offers exactly that protection. A story where death isn't defeat but promotion. That story is comforting, so people invest in it emotionally and financially. The more anxious someone is about death, the stronger their loyalty tends to be. That's why religion focuses so heavily on mortality. Funerals, sermons, scriptures about heaven and hell. It keeps fear alive because fear sells security, and that security is packaged as faith. Even language reinforces it. Words like salvation, deliverance, and redemption are business terms disguised as spiritual ones. You're in debt to sin. Faith clears your account. You owe devotion. God forgives the balance. The entire narrative mimics economic exchange. Pay, repent, earn, redeem. It's not coincidence that financial metaphors fill holy texts. Ancient societies already understood trade, and religion simply adopted that framework to make spiritual ideas easier to grasp. But over centuries, those metaphors became literal. Churches began collecting money for absolution. Monasteries became banks. Religious courts settled inheritance disputes. Faith turned into financial infrastructure. Even the architecture reflects it. Step into an ancient cathedral or a golden shrine. You'll see marble, jewels, gold leaf, towering pillars. Not poverty, but wealth meant to inspire awe. The visual message is subtle. This is what holiness looks like, and it's expensive. Worshippers were taught that giving to such splendor was giving to God. But that wealth rarely reached the poor it preached to help. Meanwhile, death, the one thing no human escapes, remains the perfect business partner. Funerary services, prayers for the dead, offerings for the afterlife, all transform grief into revenue. And the cycle repeats generation after generation, because fear never expires. Yet the genius of the model isn't just in fear. It's in exclusivity. Every religion claims to be the only path. That scarcity keeps followers from exploring alternatives. If leaving your faith means losing salvation, you'll stay, even if you doubt. It's emotional monopoly. And what's more profitable than a product everyone needs, that no one can test, and that only you can provide? That's how religion sustains itself through centuries. It doesn't just survive death, it thrives on it. Every funeral, every prayer, every hope whispered into the dark is part of a spiritual economy that never stops growing. But religion's power doesn't end at money or fear. It extends to influence, shaping laws, politics, and culture. Because once a belief system controls morality, it controls society. And when morality becomes currency, whoever defines it owns the world. When religion claims moral authority, it isn't just teaching people how to live. It's positioning itself as the sole distributor of right and wrong. That's how it evolved from private faith into public power. Once morality becomes branded, whoever owns it controls society's conscience. For centuries, that ownership has been fiercely protected. By defining sin, religion defines the boundaries of behavior. By defining virtue, it decides who belongs and who doesn't. Those definitions shape laws, culture, and even the flow of history. It's not about convincing individuals anymore. It's about managing civilization. The control of morality is one of the most profitable and durable forms of influence. It allows religion to step into every area of life: education, marriage, sexuality, politics, medicine, under the guise of protecting virtue. The moment an institution becomes the moral referee, it can justify nearly any intervention. Education was one of the first territories conquered. Early schools in Europe, the Middle East, and Asia were religious by design. Priests and monks were the first teachers. Sacred texts were the first curriculum. Even literacy was often restricted to the clergy, ensuring that only religious authorities could interpret truth. Knowledge flowed downward, filtered and edited. The result was intellectual dependency, an information monopoly. That monopoly served two purposes: stability and loyalty. Stability because education tied morality to obedience. Loyalty because the educated elite owed their status to religious institutions. If you wanted to teach, govern, or heal, you needed their blessing. Religion became the gatekeeper of progress, controlling not just what people believed, but what they were allowed to know. Even today, remnants of that system remain. In many countries, religious influence still shapes school curriculums, marriage laws, reproductive rights, and science education. The language has softened, but the structure hasn't changed. A doctrine that once burned heretics for questioning creation now lobbies to control what students read about evolution. The tools evolved. The motive didn't. Politics, too, remains entwined. No other institution has such easy access to power. Religious endorsements can sway elections, legitimize regimes, and silence opposition. Politicians invoke faith to signal morality, even when their actions contradict it. Churches and mosques fill campaign rallies. Pulpits turn into podiums, and voters are reminded that God has a political preference. It's not new. From medieval kings claiming divine right to modern leaders taking oaths on holy books, religion and governance have long traded favors. Rulers grant tax exemptions, land, or influence. In return, religious leaders sanctify authority. The transaction is old and efficient. Faith gives legitimacy, power gives protection. This symbiosis created empires. Conquest was justified as spreading truth. Colonization was sanctified as saving souls. Missionaries followed armies, and conversions followed conquest. Wherever religion went, wealth followed. Gold, slaves, resources, and territory, all framed as divine will. The Bible, the Quran, and other holy texts were carried alongside swords and ships, ensuring that spiritual expansion and economic exploitation grew together. And once established, religious institutions never released control easily. The confessional booth became an intelligence network. The pulpit became propaganda. Fear of sin became a social regulator more powerful than any law. and all of it operated tax-free, beyond the reach of accountability. Even in modern democracies, religion retains special treatment. Massive organizations report billions in revenue but declare themselves non-profit. Land and assets are protected. Some countries, governments directly fund religious schools or clergy salaries. No corporation could dream of such privilege. It's easy to see how moral authority turns into political capital. If an institution convinces people that it speaks for God, then opposing it becomes unthinkable. Questioning religion feels like questioning morality itself. That's the brilliance of the system. By merging ethics with faith, religion made itself immune to criticism. But moral monopolies are dangerous because they never stay neutral. They decide whose suffering matters and whose doesn't. They justify wars, discrimination, and oppression, all while claiming virtue. The moment a divine cause is declared, cruelty can be reframed as duty. Look through history: the Inquisition, witch hunts, forced conversions, censorship, holy wars. These weren't anomalies. They were outcomes of unchecked moral ownership. When one institution claims to know absolute truth, dissent becomes treason, and compassion becomes conditional. Even today, the same logic persists in softer forms. Sermons that shame people for their identity. Politicians invoking scripture to deny human rights. Preachers selling morality like a trademark, complete with slogans and subscription plans. The packaging changed, but the business model didn't. Religion still markets virtue just as it markets salvation, and both are bound by the same principle: exclusivity. You're either inside the moral circle or outside it. Inside, you're forgiven. Outside, you're condemned. That binary keeps followers loyal and outsiders fearful. And as long as morality remains privatized under religion's control, humanity's ethical growth stays limited. Because real morality doesn't need divine patents or holy contracts. It needs empathy, reason, and accountability, qualities that can't be sold, and therefore rarely flourish in systems built to profit from obedience. But the story doesn't end there. Because while religion has mastered the art of moral control, its greatest adaptation in the modern age isn't in temples or politics. It's in marketing. The oldest business in the world learned to rebrand itself for the 21st century, and it's doing better than ever. The digital age should have weakened religion. Science is more accessible than ever. Information flows freely. Ancient myths should struggle to survive the light of data and debate. But somehow religion hasn't vanished, it's adapted. It reinvented itself as an industry of influence, branding, and emotional management. The holy is now high definition. Walk into a modern megachurch, and it's hard to tell whether you're in a place of worship or a concert arena. Giant LED screens project perfectly lit preachers. Professional bands play music engineered for emotional crescendos. Camera crews capture every teardrop, every raised hand. The experience feels transcendent, not by divine power, but by production value. These are not accidents. Religious consultants now design worship experiences, using the same psychological tools as marketing agencies. Lighting, sound design, and pacing are crafted to maximize engagement. Congregations are analyzed like audiences. Sermons are edited for viral clips. Faith became content. And like any content, its success depends on metrics. Behind the stage, the machinery runs like a corporation. Branding teams, social media strategists, merchandisers, accountants, and lawyers, all ensuring the spiritual product stays profitable. And because religion still enjoys tax exemptions, its profit margins would make any CEO envious. This evolution didn't happen overnight. The seeds were planted when religion first discovered mass media. In the early days of radio and television, preachers realized that broadcasting faith was more lucrative than filling pews. The televangelist era was born. Figures like Oral Roberts, Jimmy Swaggart, and Jim Bakker built empires on the promise of prosperity. Donations poured in from across continents. The message was simple: give to God and God will give to you. The result was predictable: mansions, cars, scandals, and cover-ups. But the model worked. Today, the model has simply gone digital. Faith influencers fill TikTok and YouTube, delivering short sermons optimized for algorithms. They sell devotional books, faith-based skincare, branded crosses, and God-inspired clothing lines. Every prayer has a Patreon. Every testimony has sponsorship links. Even spiritual apps promise guided prayers for productivity, blending mindfulness, religion, and marketing into one sleek interface. It's not that belief disappeared, it just merged with consumerism. Religion learned to compete in the attention economy, where faith is packaged as lifestyle, and belonging is monetized through engagement. Community now means online memberships. Spiritual growth comes with premium subscriptions. The collection plate never stopped. It just turned into a checkout button. And just like ancient temples, this modern faith economy thrives on emotion, hope, guilt, fear, gratitude. Every emotional high becomes an opportunity for conversion or purchase. The human need for meaning remains the most reliable market in existence. But beyond the digital glamour, the core business principles haven't changed. The message is still loyalty. The product is still certainty. The customer is still the fearful, searching human being. The tragedy isn't that religion profits. Every human institution needs resources. The tragedy is that so much of that profit depends on keeping people dependent, afraid, and uninformed. A truly liberated mind doesn't need middlemen to find meaning. It doesn't need to buy forgiveness or subscribe to belonging. But religion depends on that dependency. Without it, the business collapses. In many countries, religious wealth remains untouchable. The Vatican alone holds vast real estate, investments, and art valued in billions. In the United States, mega-churches generate annual revenues rivaling large corporations, yet pay no taxes. In parts of Asia and the Middle East, religious foundations own media networks, universities, hospitals, entire economies. And all of it protected by the claim of divine purpose. Meanwhile, billions of believers, the ones funding this empire, are taught that materialism is sinful, that humility is holy, that sacrifice is sacred. They are told to give, not to question, and so they do, faithfully, endlessly. The moral contradiction doesn't weaken the system, it strengthens it. Because guilt, again, keeps the engine running. When a person feels unworthy, they'll give more, pray more, obey more. It's an economy of emotion disguised as salvation. What makes religion nearly indestructible isn't evidence or reason. It's emotional intelligence. It knows how to speak to the deepest human fears and desires. It offers comfort where science offers uncertainty. It promises justice where society fails to deliver it. It tells you that even when you lose everything, you're still part of a divine plan. That's a powerful story. And power, like profit, resists surrender. Still, cracks are forming. More people are stepping away, not in anger, but in quiet realization. They see that meaning doesn't have to be bought, and morality doesn't need divine branding. They understand that compassion, honesty, and reason can exist without authority telling them how to feel. They're learning that awe can come from the universe itself. Not a book, not a sermon, not a promise of paradise. That shift isn't a war against religion. It's evolution beyond it. Humanity is slowly recognizing that the tools once used to control can now be used to understand. That the same questions religion asked, about purpose, death, morality, can be explored through empathy, philosophy, and science. Answers may not be absolute, but they're honest. And honesty is something no religion can sell. Religion is, and always has been, the ultimate business. Its product is belief. Its currency is devotion. Its market is the human soul. But the real power has never been in heaven or hell. It's in our minds. The moment we stop renting our fears and start owning our thoughts, the oldest business in history loses its best customer. And maybe that's the most sacred truth of all, that freedom of thought is the only miracle we ever needed.